Okay, well, welcome to this Innovation Forum webinar, where we're going to be looking at the role of next generation materials to develop circularity for packaging. I'm Ian Welsh and I'll be your host for the next hour or so. From mycelium to sugarcane to algae, next generation materials have emerged as a viable solution for reducing the impact of packaging whilst maintaining functionality. In this webinar, we'll address the latest trends in next generation packaging materials and the role that they will play in addressing sustainable packaging challenges. To help frame our discussion, we have an excellent panel. We have Marco Maccaretti, who's Head of Sustainable Packaging Solutions and Circularity for retail brands at Mondi Group. We have Dr. Anne Lamp, CEO and co-founder of Traceless. We have Hoa Duan, Head of Impact and Sustainability at Notpla. And Robin Clark, who's currently an advisor to Notpla, but was also previously with Marks & Spencer's, Tesco and Just Eat. Welcome to you all. I'll turn to our panel very shortly, but we also want to hear from the rest of you. Please do be thinking about your points and questions that you would like me to put to the panel and write them in the Q&A box on your Zoom window. Please note your name and organisation when you are putting in your questions. You can, of course, like others' questions by clicking the thumbs up, and the more likes a question gets, the greater the chances that I put it to the panel. And do keep your questions short, please. Okay, let's go. We have a couple of case studies of companies collaborating to develop some innovative solutions. Mondi Group and Traceless are our first case study. So, Marco, Mondi Group is a packaging manufacturer. Why is it important when designing packaging to think about value and impact? Marco.
Sorry. Now, can you hear me now? Yeah, I mean, for every company that is working in the packaging industry today, there is a totally new landscape. I mean, before we were just basically trading commodities in terms of packaging. Today, we have a new dimension into the equation of serving our customers and eventually also serving our consumers, because the consumers are the ones that at the end accept or not a solution, especially when there is a change. And so when we do innovation, it's not about scaling for business, but there's also scaling for sustainability impact. Now, what defines sustainability in packaging is not always the same definition of recyclable, reusable, or compostable. In Mondi, we have 7 different dimensions. And one of these 7 is also renewable materials. And here it comes, because here is actually where the innovation starts to look beyond the normal dimensions that we mentioned before, compostable, reusable, or recyclable. That push the limits of those who have to actually take a decision to buy a food product that is now in the packaging that is renewable, and then per se by design is maybe degradable together with the food what is containing. And here is come, because this is the paradox that we are trying to actually solve. There is a paradox. Every food has an expiration date, but packaging, typically not. Typically is made to last even longer and much longer than actually after the use itself. But this is a totally different discussion because we're talking about circularity. But to come to this paradox and solving this paradox is because the numbers of waste generated by every single person in Europe is about 130 kilo a year. It's mostly coming from household and 15% is coming from retail. But I mean, household waste is mostly also retail waste. It's product that has expired, product that has not been consumed, people that have not understood or could not actually read clearly the expiration date of the food. So the vision here is to create a packaging that do not create harm. That's the beautiful image that we could actually think about the packaging into the future. Now, what are the challenges related to achieving these goals is the fact that those who have to accept a product into a new packaging, they do not have a specification. They do not know how it behaves. They do not know how to manage this product also in the supply chain. Remember that the supply chain can take also very large part of the life of the product it comes off the shelf. And sometimes product on the shelf will stay only 1 week or a couple of weeks. So what is actually necessary to do is that embracing this audacity of change. and is not to be a packaging supplier that is responding to a brand or to a retailer's brand by providing a specification, but is to propose a solution. And here comes then the collaboration with Traceless. Traceless is really their new kid on the block, excuse me for the expression, but is really the new thing that it brings flexible packaging in the food application actually to a new dimension. But and that, what does it mean for a packaging company like Mondi to embrace a journey with the new company like Traceless that is actually scaling its potential, is to be extrovert. Packaging industry, paper and packaging industry have been in the past very introvert. You know, we were doing our solutions, we were producing our solution, we were bringing them to the customers. Now it's about calling the outside in and bringing that elements that are many out on the market in terms of innovation and form of startups, to be part of the design process and to create a solution where consumer could actually have a voice. We cannot actually charge of the obligation of the responsibility of the buyers of a brand or of a retailer to choose one solution. Consumer needs to be involved. In this period of time, consumer have been empowered to choose between a product, to choose between retailers, and their voice is actually very visible. It's through the social media, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all the things that retailer and brands can actually engage in a conversation and say, hey, what about a fully renewable packaging? Because there is one thing that everybody knows and have studied in marketing. As soon as you change packaging, the sales will drop. We have seen this in Coca-Cola. We have seen this in Tropicana recently, where they changed the design of the box. They only changed the print. Boom, sales went down. So it's extremely important to have this conversation with brands and retailers about consumers and analyze consumer data. So it's a totally new landscape that creates much more inclusiveness in terms of innovation and voices in order to design and bringing a viable solution where packaging does not create harm. That's a little bit the drive that is behind the Mondi Group and the reason why we choose to work together with Traceless and see how far we can go in terms of barrier protection.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Marco. I do like your point around the fact that it's not necessary for packaging to have an infinite shelf life. In fact, that is not a necessary fact. But that must be quite an interesting conversation to have with, for example, a food brand customer. How does that conversation go when you're speaking with, say, a food brand?
Yeah, but it's a lot of back and forward question and answer, trial and error, and testing and so on. Unfortunately, the starting point is always the old specification. You need a product that is spec'd that has a shelf life of X. And here comes the conversation, but it's a conversation that drives actually value for the brand by saying, look, we cannot actually guarantee you that shelf life. Otherwise, we need to increase the thickness of our packaging. But rethinking about the supply chain and keeping the total cost of material low, there is an advantage. But it's a systemic approach. It's a systemic approach where we can provide a solution. And those have to rethink about the supply chain. The supply chain to shorten the total life of the product in order to keep to arrive to the shelf and have also an end of life when consumer households waste their product. So it is a very systemic and holistic approach about rethinking. And there is a long conversation, unfortunately, but the conversation has started. And this is the good news about it. We haven't solved the problem yet, but we are on the right track to have this conversation.
Great. Thank you very much, Marco. Do be thinking, everybody, of your questions. You can put them in the Q&A box. Marco, thanks very much indeed. And let me turn to you. You kid on the block, as Marco says. How has Traceless responded then to the challenges from Mondi in terms of material innovation, the sort of things that Marco's been talking about?
Yes, thanks. So, well, at Traceless, we produce a material that exactly how Marco described it doesn't harm and leave no trace, as we say at Traceless. So, that hence our name. So, in short, what we do is to convert agricultural side streams into granulates that are based on purely natural polymers without synthetical polymerization or chemical modification. So 100% SUPD conform and natural polymer based, also coming to the regulatory in a second. But so why does the market need such an answer at the moment? Because as Marco said, in the past years and decades, since we started our plastic revolution and production, we have designed packagings that last forever, as we see it in the environment everywhere. Actually, the plastic waste that is emitted into the environment or landfills is at the moment around 200 million tons per year, and it will double until 2040 if we don't act. So 400 million tons per year. And I mean, it's every year on top, right? So and there are studies around how to solve this. And of course, packaging is a huge part of that. And the answer is every solution we need. So it's not just natural polymers we need to solve this problem, but it's several different types of solutions like proper recycling, reuse, and so on. So that's why, Marco, you also referred to the 7 sustainability acts of the Mondi Group, and one of them being renewable materials like natural polymers. We need these products, especially for materials or products that that easily end up in the environment or just cannot be recycled, right? For small packagings, for single-use items that are even banned in the EU at the moment, items that are maybe not banned, but you need to pay higher taxes or higher fees on that at the moment. So where recycling is just difficult or where single use cannot be avoided, but plastic is not the material for it. So for these applications, natural polymers is a new category, which I'm also happy to have Notpla here in the call because we both created the natural polymers group together. It's a new material class, which we basically created, invented, and now established also on EU level in regulation. So but coming back to what Marco said regarding the solution for Mondi. So what these materials offer are basically a drop-in solution for replacing existing PE coatings, plastic coatings on paper to have a fully natural polymer-based plastic-free solution for packaging. And this is, of course, important for companies like Mondi because they cannot buy a new machinery park in order to switch to a new solution, but it needs to run on their existing plants, right? And this is also a strength of these new materials, natural polymers. And the products in the end are circular by nature. So that means the sustainability targets, but also regulatory targets are met by this new material class. And of course, now it is about increasing the volume. A new kid on the block doesn't have 100 million tons per year in production yet, right? So we are also opening our first industry plant this year. But of course, it needs to go step by step. And also bringing this material to market is always, with all new material innovation, is work to do, right? So on the one hand, increasing the volume, bringing the volume on the machines of Mondi, but then together, as Marco said, approach the brand owners and get their commitment to move. We support thereby our offer with our branding. So we are quite visible in the startup world. We're quite the new kid on the block, how Marco said it, right? So there is a momentum, which of course also the brand owners like to use, right? This is an offer we can also do to the brand owners, invite them to join, participate. As Marco said, conversations have started. And this is really the challenge at the moment to bring everything together at the same time, right? To develop the product, bring it on the machines, increase our volumes, and bring it together to market with partners in this partnership.
Thank you. This new category of materials that you've been talking about, what does typically then the end of life look like? Or what does the kind of post-consumer use look like? How's that different to where to traditional materials?
So natural polymers are circular by nature, so to say, right? So nature builds them and they can go back to nature. Like if you eat an apple and leftover goes back to nature. So in terms of disposal systems, if it is a paper coating, this goes into the paper recycling stream, and the coating is basically removed from the paper. The paper can be recycled, and the coating residue doesn't harm anything, not the plant, but also not the wastewater, so no microplastic production. When in monomaterial, in terms of film or injection molded items, for example, the end of life is basically the residual waste sometimes even ends up in the environment, which we do not postulate. But when it ends up in the residual waste, it is converted into energy, it's combusted, and then the biological cycle is closed, so to say.
Thank you very much. It's really interesting that, in fact, rather than thinking about recycling traditional materials, in fact, accepting that single use is a thing and can't be avoided. It's providing or thinking about materials that, in that instance, do no harm, as Marcus said. Well, thank you very much indeed. Loads to come back to there. Let me turn to our other case study. Robin, let me turn to you. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about when you were at Just Eat, why the partnership between takeaway food, that obviously takeaway food delivery business, and Notpla developed. Robin.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ian. We have to wind back a little bit. Probably 7 years or so ago, Blue Planet, David Attenborough, massive outcry from customers about the level of pollution, packaging waste. And at Just Eat, we had at that time, well, I mean, only until a couple of years ago, they were serving 100 million customers, probably 1 billion meals across 20 different countries. And the customers were upset, really visibly upset. The feedback we were doing in surveys across lots of different countries, it did vary by country, were really upset by the packaging waste of their takeaway food. And of course, the restaurants also were upset. Typically, the average restaurant on the takeaway platform at that time, small businesses, turnover of a couple of 100,000 a year, specialists in their own cuisine, but had no investment money to find a solution to the plastic packaging crisis. And so as a marketplace aggregator in the middle, we stepped in to innovate on their behalf. And we looked globally. We did a global search. We ran hackathons at the UCL. We spoke to lots of industry experts. In fact, at the time, I'd been judging the innovation awards at the Food Packaging Association. And so we did a global search for who was really working on alternatives to plastic. And there was very little. There was a little bit of Indonesian edible stuff, which was interesting, but not really relevant or right for the time. But lo and behold, 3 miles away down the road from our office was Notpla. And they were working on edible packaging. And we began a trial and partnership with them on, you may well know their OHO capsules. Look at a little bit like this. This is one of their oil pipettes, and you pop them in their mouth, and it's packaging, and you can eat it and drink the water or juice that's inside. And we started with those on ketchup. We worked with policymakers, with legislators. We gave evidence at number 10 and 11 Downing Street. We asked for them to come and partner with us for validation, really, than the cash. Innovate UK came in, gave us the partnership. I brought in other FMCG partners, and we worked with a number of different restaurants in the UK on the ketchup sachet, evolving during COVID to a brief on the box. The plastic box that we transport most takeaway food in, probably a couple of billion of those used in the industry across Europe every year. And exactly as Marco says, I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? You need it for, 45 minutes, and the damn thing is left with us for 600 years. It's just absurd. And the guys at Notpla were brilliant because they were going back to packaging exactly as Anne's talking about and looking at natural solutions to that solution. So, they were thinking about eggs and the packaging there. They were thinking about orange peels and what could they take from nature for a much better suited solution. And of course, they found seaweed. And we pivoted to the box. We put I mean, these guys at Notpla are the geniuses, and made an alginate, coated the cardboard to give it the same heat-proof, waterproof, grease-proof properties of plastic. And lo and behold, 7 years later, we're now selling, we put it into 11 countries where we sell to B2B restaurants. And we also, my team also used to run all of the UEFA sponsorships. So we put it into stadiums, women's UEFA Champions League finals, Europa League finals in stadiums. And now, of course, Noppler are no longer pre-revenue. They are selling millions of units a year in stadiums, in food service. And it's been a really interesting journey to help them scale in some way.
How did Just Eat's customers react to the changing packaging?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, they loved it. I think be under no illusion though, we have to be pragmatic. You know, when we look at, as a commercial guy, you know, ex-retail, the buying decisions for a takeaway are, can I get a curry? Can I get it quickly? Is it at the right price, right? Of course, sustainability is really important, but it is not a decision-making factor for where am I going to buy. Perhaps for 1 or 2% enlightened customers, a little bit more so in Germany, a little bit less so in the US. But of course, the main decision makers are about the food and delivery. But the feedback was brilliant. And in enlightened restaurants, they would use social media to drive really strong engagement amongst the customers. And it creates a point of difference. And actually, that group of restaurants is growing. The interest is growing. And once you start, particularly this natural polymers group, then legislators see it as an alternative. They asked us in number 11, when we were giving evidence to the Chancellor, Phil Hammond said, why can't we just tax the plastic box? And we said, no, you can't, because there's no alternative. But work with us, find an alternative. Then you can tax the plastic out of existence, close the green premium that Bill Gates often talks about to help the alternatives to scale. And I think that's the stage, you know, 7 years on, that's the stage we're now beginning to approach. EPR has put a $1.5 billion cost on to retail, and that's why you're starting to see less plastic in the retail sector. And that's the direction of travel. Customers loved it, restaurants loved it, and it's only going to grow.
Do you think the plastic sector then will accept that recycling our way out of this isn't actually the solution? Because that's where they're hanging their hat right now.
Well, I mean, you only need to understand basic level maths. I mean, my son's doing further maths at A level. I can't understand what he's talking about, but I can understand the basic maths of the number of people on the planet, the amount of waste. I think Marco talked about 130 kilos per person. We're going to have 11 billion people on the planet in 2100. It doesn't work. You know, we only recycle 7% of the world's plastic waste, according to the Ellen MacArthur. Everyone knows that stat. We know we can't recycle our way out of it. And so we have to find alternatives. And that's where, you know, the wonderful work of Noppler, Traceless, is creating alternatives, and legislators desperately need to catch up with this sector and support it with investment, innovation, and legislation to nurture this growing sector.
Okay, thank you, Robin. And thank you also to our first questioners. We now have a few coming in, so do keep them coming in. Do keep thinking about what you would like to ask our panel. Hoa, let me turn to you. Thanks very much indeed for your patience. How did Noppler respond then to the challenges that Robin and his team brought you from Just Eat?
Yeah, thank you, Ian. And just to introduce Noppler, the name Noppler is short for not plastic, and our mission is to make plastic packaging disappear. So the main feedstock that we use is seaweed. And as Rowan kind of mentioned the maths, when we do the maths on if we were to use seaweed to replace all single-use plastic in the world, how much seaweed do we actually need? And the answer came back at around 0.06% of ocean space to grow enough seaweed to replace all single-use plastic. So that's why we have explored and done a lot of work on looking different properties of seaweed. And there's around 12,000 species of seaweed out there. So the possibility is almost endless. And the fact that seaweeds grow doesn't require any land use, and the fact that it also doesn't require fertilizer or fresh water and can grow incredibly quickly has really convinced us that this is going to be one of the many feedstocks for the future, and especially to replace plastic from single-use applications. So when Robin came to us, we actually have a team that called the Futures Lab. We set this up is really to welcome brands to come to us and tell us their packaging challenge, and we can then go and see how can we bring in natural polymers and this material that we are working on to tackle those challenges. And it was incredible because we work on a number of different products like flexible film, pipettes, as Robin kind of showed earlier on, to OHOs, the edible pouch, to the coating products. And it was really a revelation from Just a Takeaway that that they are getting feedback from customer that this is very much in demand, and this is the solutions that we can work with together to really bring the scale elements of how a startup of 55 people could really work with a big name like Just a Takeaway to bring the technology to replace millions of single-use plastic. So to date, we've replaced nearly 20 millions now over the last 7 years, and it's like a massive step up for us as well, going from lab-based companies to really now working with really large manufacturings and being at over 12 countries and working with bigger and bigger brands to really help eliminating the single-use plastic packaging that they currently have. And I think just to touch a bit on policy and regulations as well. All the panelists has talked about. This is also going to come into play. We're seeing EPR, PPWR in Europe. Materials use are going to be regulated more and more. And we understand that this is going to be a new category of unmodified natural polymers. So that's why, together with Traceless and some other material companies, we set up the Natural Polymers Group to really cement the work that we've achieved in developing this new category of materials and getting that accepted as a growing market and growing demand for finding new materials that can provide a better end of life, a more sustainable use of resources, and in general, a much more sustainable packaging system where some of the end-of-life options could be from paper recycling to composting, and knowing that none of this material is going to create any harm, like Marco said at the beginning.
Thanks very much indeed. What does the carbon footprint look like of the seaweed? If you did indeed grow enough to replace all single-use plastic, you mentioned the statistic 0.6% or 0.06% of ocean space. What does the carbon footprint look like? Are there carbon benefits there?
Yes, there's definitely carbon benefits in when using more natural polymers. So when we did the LCA on our products, we were able to show that our products compared to an alternative have between 40 to 70% lower carbon footprints. And that is a comparison either using fossil-based plastic or bio-based plastic as well. But then I think it was also worth highlighting that the using of these new feedstock and material is beyond just the carbon footprint. It's also a wide number of the environmental factors that normally people might neglect or don't really look at. And also the fact that when we're comparing this to a plastic packaging, none of the LCA of packaging actually take into account the microplastic pollutions and the actual climate impact at the end of life of these products. So even though we have, yes, a very big reductions, we know that this number in reality would be actually much bigger. And that's why we also do a lot of work with academics and LCA experts to really pushing the standards of how LCA are currently being done for plastic, but for packaging in general. So then we can start to truly take into account the environmental impact of plastic and materials in a much more comprehensive way.
Thank you very much. Fascinating stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, let's turn to some audience questions. Panel, what I'm going to do is I'll put each question just to one of you. If you want to come in in as well, please use the raise hand function on Zoom or indicate by waving at me that you want to come in. So we have a question about collection and sorting. Our question says new materials need to be collected separately and sorted. How does this work in terms of, are we looking at just another waste stream? Marco, do you want to have a go at that one?
Yeah. As I mentioned before, we're not only working with innovators and startups, we're working with brands, but we need also to work also on those who are collecting and recycling these products. Because at the end is the ultimate stage where we can guarantee that the material go back into the flow and create either no harm because it goes into the environment, or is treated in order to be environmental harmless, but in the sense of circularity, to extract the material that is valuable and bring it back into the system. So it is a discussion along the entire supply chain. And now when a new product comes into the discussion, the discussion keeps going. The important thing is to consider the scale of these partners in relation to the scale of a company that is actually on the startup phase. There is a need to manage the expectations. And that is extremely important. Trying to transfer the message that is in scaling and so on, especially the brands. When the brands get very enthusiastic, wow, we would like to have capacity all for us. We would like to have capacity to cover all the world. So in that conversation, it is necessary to lower the expectation, but to be realistic and to talk to all the people in order to close the loop of whatever the end of the material, either in nature or into a recycling stream.
Thank you. And you want to come in?
Yeah, maybe to add here, thank you, Marco. So especially to the question of the new sorting and new recycling streams, which would be necessary. In fact, as I said, natural polymers are circular by nature. So we don't need extra sorting, collecting, and actually we don't want the material back, maybe with plastic particles in it because it comes from a plastic sorting plant, right? So it is important if you have material for single use, like natural polymers, the footprint needs to be so low that single use really can be done without harm, and also with the LCA supporting that, because energy is so low, which you need in order to process everything. So that's on the one side. On the other side, we have regulation, PPWR. And for PPWR, from 2030 onwards, every material must be recycled at scale. Innovative material have some years more, but in the end, this is the regulation for all materials, but certain exceptions. And this is something which the Natural Polymers Group did in the past years to work together with the EU Commission in order to get the full commitment of the EU Commission to add the natural polymers in delegated acts to the PPWR as a category with separate individual recycling targets, meaning no recyclability at scale needs to be implemented for natural polymers because they are circular by nature. And this is super important when we talk about establishing new recycling streams, because there will be no recycling at scale for 150,000 different materials. Will not be the case. So we will see probably a reduction from 2030 onwards to monomaterials, and the monomaterials like PE, PP, where recycling already exists and where it's also commercially feasible. It doesn't need to be commercially feasible to recycle. Someone needs to earn money by doing it. So we will see, I think, a reduction in monomaterials plus natural polymers, because they are and will be accepted by this recycling criteria because they are so environmental friendly that they are circular by nature.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Regulation clearly is a big challenge, and regulation in packaging has developed for safety in food and pharmaceutical applications. I wondered, Hoa, if you'd be willing to comment on how you've managed or how you do navigate through the regulatory challenges.
So with all of the materials that we have, a lot of them are for edible applications. So for that, we used the ingredients that actually you would find in a lot of in food products, and also manufacture in food safe environment, and they all comply with safety migrations rules, and also for use for food contacts. So in that sense, as with any manufacturing packaging manufacturers, we have to comply with the same safety rules. What we really go beyond is really the fact that our packaging is actually safe to consume, which is really to prove the point of how natural the packaging can be, and the fact that they all can be home compostable as well. And in testing, we see that packaging start to disintegrate between 2 to 3 weeks, which is back to the point of we are making packagings that would last just as long as the food that is currently it is used to store, rather than using a material that's lasts about 400 to 500 years.
So what happens to your packaging if it's not if someone doesn't eat it, it's not composted, what happens to it then?
So it will, as we've tested in natural environment, it will start disintegrate. So the same as you would see when you have either a leaf or an orange peel, it will start disintegrate like any natural polymers would.
Okay. Thank you. Marco, you want to come in briefly?
Yeah, I want to add on Ho and on comments about the regulation. Yes, we need to comply to regulations. The point is that in the last year, we have seen a generation of regulation that is basically we haven't never seen before, especially in the packaging industry. And this comes from organization or institution or regulators. They have a lack of knowledge of something that is evolving also, because solutions like NOPLA or traceless, they're coming on the market, and the regulation cannot catch up with this innovation, because this innovation opens up a new perspective of what we can achieve in terms of circularity, zero waste, zero emissions, and so on. And so in that context, yes, we need to comply, but we also have the obligation to go back to the same regulator and give a positive feedback by saying, yes, the ambitious is there, the timeline is short, I can tell you what is available on the market, I can tell you what the partners are doing, and maybe also anticipating what is coming next, in order for the regulators to be ready to issue the new target, the new limitation, whatever it is, okay, in order to comply with the ambitions to create the world where there is responsible consumption or beyond the responsible production. So yes, regulation, but we need to have a conversation. Now, when brands and packaging companies, because of the critical mass that they play into the game, then is the role also of the packaging industry. As I said before, becoming more extrovert by saying what you think and by listening what the other have to say, and start to elaborate, consult, and drive new regulations in the future.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. Okay, next question. This is one our currently most popular question is, what are the biggest limits regarding applications from traceless and NOPLA? So what are the biggest, the kind of the limits to developing the product? Our questioner suggests, is it process, is it paper recyclability, barrier, or others? So, Anne, what's the kind of the barrier to or the things that limits traceless's potential right now?
So, I mean, we are 4.5 years old as a company, and we started, of course, with very, very basic properties, and we increased them by time. Until now, we already have a material that is a thermoplast. That's very important to be a drop-in solution for paper coatings, for film extrusion, hot melts, or injection molding. So this is the first barrier which we overcame. For the material properties, in the end, after processing, there are already also basic applications possible, like basic paper coatings with sealability, barrier functions, fat barrier, water vapor barrier, and so on. Also injection molding products already being processable on big, large industry plants. But of course, not yet. We have the high barriers, for example, right, against high moisture, water vapor barrier, oxygen barrier. This is still under development. Therefore, I see a huge potential in multi-layer packagings of purely natural polymer layers, because they do not need to be separated afterwards, because it's circular by design. So there's a huge potential in the future compared to the plastic-based packagings, which are not allowed anymore to be multi-layer because they cannot be separated and recycled anymore. So this is basically limiting us at the moment. Time to develop further new materials. So also synergies between different natural polymers are very important here in order to get different functionalities in different layers of multi-layer packaging. And of course, in the end, also time to scale up. So right now we are opening up our first industrial plant this year in Q3. With a couple of 1,000 tons per year already in capacity. That is already good for a company 4.5 years old, but of course not enough at all to really make an impact. And this is why next scale-up step is the industry plant in a couple of years with substantial bigger amount of material. And for that, of course, startups in this stage need capital to grow. This is, I think, the biggest hurdle.
Thanks. And what about, same question to you? What's limiting NotPla right now?
Yeah, so I think what we're seeing is really the technologies improve almost month by month. So last year we really released our first rigid products, which was ice cream spoon. A year before that products didn't even exist. I think and we continually working to trying to improve the property of our materials for the right applications as well. So maybe a soup spoon is not yet possible, but we're expecting over the next few years or so, we'll be able to really work much more on improving the properties that we have, but also, as Anne mentions, working with other natural polymers where by the fact that we know that we are all natural polymers, therefore the combinations of them give a much better end-of-life route compared to non-recyclable plastic or multi-layer plastic. So that is probably one of those things where, I think this is a very exciting new category, and we're changing by the minute.
Thank you very much indeed. Really good question here. I wondered, Robin, if you might want to tackle it. Is the biggest challenge the discovery or invention of alternative materials, or the adoption of alternatives that have already been designed by NotPla and Traceless and others? Robin, what do you think? Should we still be looking for more, or have we got what we need and we need to adopt what we have?
I think it's a great question. I think there's a challenge about time. Plastic has been around for, here you go, I'm going to weave it in, Ian. We sit on the site of NotPla here today, is where actually they first discovered plastic. And this is a coin made of plastic from 1887, one of the first plastic coins. So we've been making plastic for over 130 years. And the wonderful innovators at NotPla and Traceless are attempting to scale something in a very short period of time. I was just saying, Traceless has been around for 4 years. So we need to give them time to scale. We need to give them time to adopt, to refine these products. But at the same time, when we worked with government, they have innovation programs like the SSSP, which was a 50 million innovation program, which ultimately, when it boiled down to it, when I was involved 4 or 5 years ago, was really focused on innovation around how to use plastic more effectively. So we need government to invest in alternatives as well, to help fuel alternative products. Understand that there are limitations. Plastic still is a very good material used in the right space, but we clearly need new materials to provide alternative use cases. For the example of a takeaway, why are we still packaging a takeaway that we need for half an hour in a package for 600 years? We know that packaging a cucumber is saving food waste. So there are places for this, and we know that food waste is a third of, a huge contributor to GHGs. So I think we need both, Ian. To answer the question directly, we need to give the companies time to build these products, to scale them, but we also need much more innovation and understand that that's got to be driven to find alternatives.
Okay, well, let's move to another question then. Another great question, pointing out that a lot of packaging consumers never see. We talked earlier, particularly from Marco, about the kind of consumers getting involved in the packaging and consumer engaging packaging. what work needs to be done in terms of dealing with the packaging that consumers don't see? What work's being done here to bring natural polymers into that market? Anne?
I didn't hear that question. I was
Sorry,
out
we're
for a
talking about
second.
the question points out that consumers don't see a lot of packaging. A lot of packaging is not consumer facing, and there's work that needs to be done there. We've been talking a lot about consumer packaging or consumer facing packaging today. Well, what about work into the packaging that consumers don't see? I wondered what your view on that was.
So on that side, of course, we do not have the pull from the brand owners on the one hand side, or from the end consumers on the first point. The pull from the brand owners can exist if regulation is there, or if other constraints like sustainability targets or price issues drive the demand, the pull from the brand owners. We see a lot of interest in our products that are made for like hidden plastic substitutes, right? So not consumer-facing products like hot melts, for example, or also B2B packagings. So I think there is not just the end consumers want sustainable solutions demand from the market, but especially regulatory, price, competitiveness, and also being not dependent from in non-EU imports. Plus, their sustainability targets to reduce their carbon footprint we see it a lot also in companies that do not really just focus on products for end consumers, but also for B2B packaging, which you don't see. For example, the hot melts, no one sees hot melts. Hot melts glue together cardboards or paper, but it's all plastic and it's all fossil based, and we see a huge interest in that as well.
Someone has to talk on mute. It was me. And thank you. Marco, you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, there is a rising technology coming up about the digital packaging passport, where data about the construction of the packaging will be classified and specifically be expressed or explained. Now, having that bucket of data, now is it possible to transfer this data into consumer digestible message? Now, to do this is not easy because it could be done directly on the packaging, but brands do not like to lose their image on the packaging in order to differentiate by the logo. But there are others who are taking more the audacity of putting the so-called QR code, or connected packaging is also called. Basically, the possibility to use the digital, the cell phone to scan and to get informed about where the packaging is coming from, how the packaging is made, and what is actually the end of the packaging, which is typically a question that everybody of us, when he's at home and look at the plastic packaging and say, what should I do? In which bin should I take it? So there is an element that is combining technology with data and consumers that will allow to inform consumer about the history of the packaging and the end of life of the packaging. That will be a game changer as well.
Thank you very much. Okay, a question for Juho, not Pla. A couple of questions of a similar theme. And it's all really about your interest in how you're going to scale your operations. And are you looking to work with local coastal communities, for example, to develop livelihoods impact from your work, and also ensure there's not a potential coastline grab, which is obviously a danger if the seaweed is hugely upscaled in production. So how are you looking at that, and how will you upscale in the right way?
We currently work with a lot of international organizations, including the UN, and a lot of initiative coming out of that around sustainable seaweed agriculture. There's a real push so seaweed in itself is actually a very commonly used feedstock, not only for consumptions, but also in our everyday things like pharmaceuticals, skincare, seaweed extract is also used in beer, ice cream to create textures as well. So there is already an established market for seaweed. But what we want to make sure is that our supply chains is sustainable, and the people that we work with, the demand that we provide would be able to uplift coastal community, like the question posed as well. So there's a lot of positive movement around this in terms of building almost the equivalent of the FSC certifications to the seaweed world. And we're doing a lot of thinking with the supplier that we work with as well, in terms of how we start building these standards to the supply chains, and how we can then also bring the seaweed markets along with it as well. And because we think that there's massive potential here, and the global policy also see that there is a lot of potential within seaweed, and how seaweed can be used as a feedstock to tackle a various number of challenges on climate change that we currently have. Because don't forget, seaweed actually also sequester carbon as well. There's quite a few seaweed farms are currently being developed purely for that benefit. So yeah, so I think it's going to be an exciting next few years for seaweed development, and we are currently very active in thinking about how we can play a positive role within that.
Thank you very much. Anne, similar question to you. How are you ensuring that your potential growth is as low impact as possible?
Low impact our growth, you mean in terms of our carbon footprint from our material?
Well, I'm really thinking in terms of feedstock growth.
Okay. Well, so when I started this company, it was very, very important for me that everything I do has a positive footprint and not a negative footprint. So it starts with a business model. So you choose substances and raw materials that have a low impact, that are residues, not food-based, but residue-based, and that also exist in large scale, right? So this is the first thing. Then growing it needs to, in order to establish the growth and to generate the impact we want to generate with our plastic substitute, we need also a high volume availability of this feedstock. And this was the second thing, to not only ensure it's non-food, but also there is a high availability of this residue worldwide. And when we now further grow our business, we of course also look into other and more side streams, non-food side streams that have in additional also a high availability worldwide, but also have a low impact. For example, they do not cause land use change because we demand a lot of this material, right? This is very important. So we really focus on residues, and we in the end only compete with feed producers or with bioenergy producers.
Thank you very much. Robert, I wonder if you'd have a comment on from a brand perspective, the need to be very aware of the growth. If you get a massive growth in new materials, keeping an eye on the kind of footprint and making sure that it's at scale, it's still as efficient as it was when it was a pilot.
Yeah, it's really tricky. We learned this back in I think early 2000s, back at M&S. We did the Marks and Spencer. We did the first trials of the alternative to the single-use carrier bag, plastic carrier bag. And at that time, we brought in the Bag for Life. One of my very close colleagues was running the whole trial. And it was wonderful. It was lauded as, this is the answer, Bag for Life. Everyone adopted a Bag for Life across all the grocers in the UK. 10 years later, the sad fact was that we were using more plastic, or about the same amount, in the Bag for Life as the single-use bags, because of course they throw them away after 5-10 uses. And so the brief at Noppler was very specific. Can we think about, and by the way, we're not claiming that we did a better job. It's just that we learned from these things, and the experts that did the Bag for Life trial were the experts in the field. But the brief with the packaging for the takeaway sector was, can we consider all end-of-life uses? Can we not use any dangerous chemicals, PFAS, AKLs? I'm going to get the wrong chemical description, but can we stay away from all the harmful chemicals? Can we make sure end of life works? So that we try to consider all those alternatives, fully knowing that at some stage we might get something wrong because we haven't considered or everything that we know at the time. And I think it's really important to be open to criticism and feedback. So we would go round to all of the experts who'd been in the game for a lot longer than us, and I would speak to Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth, to Unilever experts, and say, listen, we're enlightened Luddites. We don't know the answers. This is what we're doing. Tell us where we're going wrong. And only when everyone came back and said, yeah, probably right, keep going, did we think that we were probably going in the right direction. And yeah, it seems that that's been the case.
Thanks very much. There was a question that I know Anne was did an answer to behind the scenes around collaboration, and just we're coming towards the end, but I just wanted to ask everybody very briefly, what does collaboration look like in the natural polymer space? And just very briefly, what does the collaboration look like?
Yeah, I mean, we see it here, right? Not Plant Traces. I think we have a very good collaboration on the political side. So we founded together the Natural Polymers Group together with right now 6 other natural polymers producers. But of course, we want to grow this group and we want to grow this material class worldwide. It's a global group. And I think it's very important to be a strong voice against the conventional fossil-based industry. I mean, we are still small against that, but the effect is huge. We saw it because we were sitting in the EU Commission together with the president of European Plastics and so on. So we are visible, we are seen, and we also together bring this voice of transformation into the market. And this is also, I think, an invitation to more and more natural polymers producers to join us and to collaborate and to contact us, because as I also wrote in my answer, that when we think about the future of packaging, I mean, as I said, we are 4.5 years old. We have basic packagings right now for basic applications. But when we think about the future of packaging, where we really, really want to make an impact and can make an impact, then we need to collaborate and bring certain materials together, ideas together, designs together. And this is also only possible if different material producers collaborate.
Thank you very much. Paul, do you want to come in just very quickly on that? Anything to add?
I mean, I can add that our perspective is collaboration is part of the conversation, because I used to say sustainability never ends, and so innovation, call it collaboration, okay, never stops. So it is a way that once you started and is continuously growing in the aspiration and the possibility. So sustainability never ends, innovation never stops. It's part of the conversation. How far we can go next, how much we can reduce, how much we can eliminate, how big is going to be our footprint, blah blah blah. And there are many aspects in this conversation.
Okay, thank you. We're coming towards the end. I just want one final thing from all of our panel. Just very quickly, what are you taking away from the conversation today? What has inspired you as we come to the end? Very briefly, please. Hoa, you first.
I think it's really about the potentials that natural polymers can really bring, and how partnerships with either brands or manufacturing partners really going to be able to change the game and help us replace as many single-use plastic as there are.
Thanks, Hoa. Robin.
Yeah, probably legislation, as ever. We need legislation to close the gap on the price and to support development in this sector.
Thank you, Robin. Anne.
Maybe the collaboration, first of all, being very happy to be with Mondi here in this webinar as a very strong partner. Then with Notpla, of course, in terms of the materials. And I'm really impressed by all the interested questions and participants. So yeah, collaboration is key.
Thank you, Anne. And Marco.
Bring more sustainable finance into the game. This is actually so critical in order to create the critical mass, in order to have the capital to grow into the market.
Okay, yep, show us the money. I totally agree. Okay, We're going to have to draw things to a close there. I thank you very much indeed to our panel for their insights and for the great questions. Thanks so much indeed. Someone did ask if we were recording the webinar. We are, and we'll be in touch with the audio and video recordings once we've edited them in the next few days. So we'll be back with you very shortly. On that, I will also make sure that we share the questions with our panel so they get a chance to see your questions again, because I think there really are some fascinating questions there. I know there's some people hoping to reach out as well. So those will all go to our panel. Now, the material issues that we've been talking about today will, of course, be very much part of the conversations at the Sustainable Packaging Innovation Forum in Amsterdam on the 6th and 7th of May. If you'd like to join us, then good news. There is a special discount for webinar listeners. Just use the code webinar10 at the checkout when you're registering for your conference pass. For now, I hope you found this webinar useful. I've been Ian Welsh. Thank you for your time and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.